Happy Sabbath. It's always a privilege to stand before you. I want to thank you that are here present, those that are watching online. This year, Isandro, my son, was able to do something that he's been wanting to do for a long time. Ever since he was a little kid, we used to take him to a Kima boardwalk to walk around, look at the water. He enjoyed getting on the kiddie rides. But there was one ride that always fascinated him. How many of you have been to Kima Boardwalk? There's one ride called the Boardwalk Bullet. How many of you have been on it? So this is an interesting ride. When you stand across from it and you observe it, as the car comes around full of people, the whole structure moves. And it doesn't move just a little bit. It moves a couple of feet. And it goes by real quick. So I told him that when he was 10 years old, he would get on the ride. But this year, he more than met the high requirement. So about 3 or 4 months ago, we went to Kima and Alexa went with us. And I told him, today you're getting on the ride. He was so excited. He was so excited. He got on the ride. He was laughing the whole way, and afterwards, he really enjoyed it. And my fear was that if he got on the ride and didn't like it, it would have been a problem. Some people like these rides, and some people don't like these rides. Some of you may not like them. So about a month ago, we went back to Kima, and this time, Brother Bobby went with us. And it was a surprise that I learned that he'd never been on a roller coaster before. So it was my honor and privilege to sit behind him as I see him for the first time experiencing this roller coaster. So I have to explain to you the difference between a wooden roller coaster, which this ride is, and a metal one. The metal roller coaster is very smooth, and they try to scare you by doing twists and drops and loops. But they don't have to do that with wooden roller coasters. These things are dangerous. They feel unstable. The minute you get on it, it shakes everywhere. It goes very fast. And it feels like it's going to come off the rails at any minute. So I'm sitting behind Bobby as the ride starts. And usually as this ride goes, you lean into the curves, right? Bobby's head was just going up and down. Up. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? After the ride, I asked him, I think he said he was praying. He was praying that it would come to a safe conclusion. He did not have the same experience as Isandro. He didn't like it. But that seems to be sometimes the experience of Christians. Now, these rides are meant to be scary, right? Our Christian walk is not supposed to be scary. Just like the scripture reading that we read, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Today I've been asked to preach about Isaiah's vision of God. And I have titled this message, Behold God. Now, to give you a little bit of background, Isaiah was born during the reign of King Uzziah. How many remember King Uzziah? He was a king that was over the area of Judah. He became king when he was 16 years old. Imagine a teenager being your president. Well, he was 16 years old, and he reigned for 52 years, between the years 790 and 739 BC. But the thing about him that says in Chronicles is that he did what was right in the eyes of God. Now, when you read Chronicles and you read about these kings, it'll say he did evil in the sight of God, and sometimes it'll say some kings did what was right. He was one of the ones that did what was right. Now, he was very smart, innovative, as he reigned. And under his reign, Judah prospered. Not only did he fortify the walls, not only did he defeat the enemies, but the Ammonites were paying him tribute. another country was paying him taxes. And because of this, his fame spread all over the area, even all the way to Egypt. And the people under his reign prospered. And prospered so much that the Bible says that they added house to house and field to field. So they bought properties, they bought vacation homes. They were becoming wealthy. But something happened to Uzziah. He became so famous and increased in strength so much that he became proud. And how many of you know what he did? What did King Uzziah do? Now one day, he decides he's going to go into the temple to burn some incense in the altar of incense. Now how many of you know who are the only people that are allowed to go into the temple? So he decides that as king, he's going to do this. Now, God said that the only people that could burn incense were the priests. But he became so proud that he decided he was going to do it. And we read in 2 Chronicles 26:18 that the priests came up to him. 80 priests came up to the king and said, "It is not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by the Lord." So he becomes angry and starts arguing with the priests. And how many of you know what happened at that moment? Well, by him deciding to offer incense, he was saying he was above God's law. Now, there's another instance in the Bible when someone did something contrary to God's law. If you remember, the Ark of the Covenant, when it was being transported, had to be transported by the priests. They were long pieces of wood that went through the circles, and the altar could be lifted. And God said, "My altar will be moved by priests." Well, the children of Israel decided they were going to move the ark, and they used oxen. And these oxen, as it was being transported, were stumbling, and the ark was teetering. And there was a guy by the name of Uzzah who was not a priest. And when the ark was tilting to the point where it was going to fall, he stretched his hand to do what? To steady it. And what happened to him? He died right on the spot. So when God says something needs to be done by someone, he means something needs to be done by someone. The priests were a representative of Christ. So the king decided he, not a representative of Christ, was going to offer incense. And as he was arguing with the priests, a little spot formed on his forehead. What do you think it was? It was leprosy. Immediately he ran away from the temple, knowing that God had struck him. And from that day forth, he lived in a separate palace because he was essentially cut off from the people. If you read Numbers 15, chapter 15, verse 30, it reads, "But the person who does anything presumptuously, whether he is native born or a stranger, that one brings reproach on the Lord, and he shall be cut off from amongst his people." Now, during that time, there was a lot of outward prosperity in Judah. People were worshiping God, but their heart was really far away from God. There was violence in the land, the poor being oppressed, idolatry was being practiced. So at that time, Isaiah is tasked to bring a message of rebuke to God's people. He is a young prophet. Let me paint it to you this way. He is a young prophet. He's now living through a period of leadership transition. The king that had brought so much prosperity to the area had died. His son took over, but you never know if the son is going to be as good a king as the father. The people were turning to idolatry and apostasy, and pretty soon the enemies of Judah were going to attack. It was during this time that Isaiah is asked to bring a message of rebuke to God's people. And understandably, he didn't want to do it. He shrank from the responsibility. I mean, would you? Would you be a prophet during these trying times? Sometimes prophets didn't live long. This caused him a lot of despair and depression. And as he's thinking about this, he's standing under one of the arches of the temple. And he has a vision. He has a vision as if the veil that divides the holy to the most holy place is lifted up, and he peers into the most holy place. And the story starts in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. And we're going to start reading from that verse. And it reads, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew." Now this is an amazing vision. He's seeing God's glory. He's looking into the most holy place in heaven. And there's 2 beings that are flying around, 2 angels. And it's interesting how the Bible describes them. They have 6 wings. Now, why do you think these angels have 6 wings? Wouldn't 2 suffice? Well, with 2, they cover their feet. With 2, they cover their faces. And with 2, they fly. So these are holy beings. They have no sin. However, they are the ones that stand the closest to God's glory. And God's glory is so powerful that even though they're majestic holy beings, they have to cover themselves. And poor Isaiah is looking straight into this place. And one cried to another, saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord." Now the translation, the Hebrew translation for Lord here is Yahweh, which is Jesus Christ. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. Now Isaiah is in the presence of God. He's seeing his glory and his majesty. He's seeing these holy angels flying around, and he hears all these terrifying sounds. So he says, "Woe is me, for I am undone." What does that mean? I am undone. I'm going to be destroyed. To put in today's vernacular, I am dead meat. I am not supposed to be here. I am not supposed to be seeing this. And the glory is so awesome, he thinks he's going to be destroyed. The reasons he gives are, "Because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Now in chapter 5 of Isaiah, he's delivering some woes to the people. Woe this, woe that. And now he's saying, woe is me. It's interesting that the closer we get to God, we don't get holier. That's a misconception. The closer you get to God, the more sinful that you appear. Verse 6, "Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it, and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sin purged. Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, send me." So initially, Isaiah is in despair because of the condition of Judah. And what awesome encouragement is given to him. Even though he's experiencing a transition of leadership, even though there's an increase of sin and apostasy, even though God's people are not listening, even though he might feel inadequate for this mission, he is beholding God. Now, the excuse he gave was, I am a man of what? Unclean lips. How wonderful that an angel touches his lips. So he takes away the excuse that he has and prepares him for the mission. And he is so encouraged that he says, here I am, send me. What contrast between what's happening around him and what's happening in heaven? There is no transition of leadership in heaven. God is sitting high and lifted up. God is being worshipped by the angels. There is no chaos. Isaiah is being encouraged. And this vision encourages him through his long prophetic ministry. Verse 9 reads, and he said, go and tell this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull, their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return and be healed. And this message is very important for us today. What do we have today around us? Don't we have political instability? All you have to do is turn on the news, and the political parties are basically destroying each other. There's violence going on around us. Turn on the news, and there's more violence in these cities than before. Correct? People don't want to hear about God. People don't want to hear about the second coming. And you and I, just like Isaiah, may be discouraged by what's going on. But don't be discouraged, because the same thing happened to Jesus. Let's go to John chapter 12, verse 37. John 12:37. You can hear the frustration as John writes these words. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, so many signs, they still would not believe in him. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah, the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason they could not believe, because as Isaiah said elsewhere, and these are the words given to Isaiah, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, nor turn, and I will heal them. Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. God says he will never leave you nor forsake you. Do you believe that? Did he encourage Moses when he gave him the mission? Not only did he appear in the burning bush, but he showed Moses his glory to encourage him. Did he not encourage Jacob as he fell asleep and used a rock as a pillow? He had a vision of a stairway leading to heaven. Angels coming up and down, and God sitting on top, telling him, you have been forgiven. You have been established. Did he not encourage Joshua after Moses died? He took on the great responsibility of leading God's people into Canaan. He presented to Joshua as the commander of the armies of the Lord. And then he also showed up to Saul before he elected him to be his apostle. So God is always showing up to his people to encourage them. So today I'm encouraging you, I encourage myself to complete our mission. Is God still sitting in his throne high and lifted up? Behold God. Do not look at what's happening around you. Look into God. And what is our mission, you ask? If we go to Matthew 28, verse 19 and 20, we see what our mission is. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. That is our mission, and God is encouraging us to fulfill it. How many of you have read about the Battle of Gettysburg? One hand, two hands. This was a battle that was fought between the armies of the North and the South here in the United States during the Civil War. It happened between July 1st and July 3rd, 1863. And up until that time, the South had been winning most, if not all, the battles. On that day, on those 2 days, there were about 51,000 casualties. Very bloody war. About 7,000 men died. President Lincoln was asked to deliver a message at the dedication of the Gettysburg Civil War Cemetery on November 19, 1863. The main speaker was a man named Edward Everett, a former dean of Harvard University, and he was very famous. He spoke for 2 hours. Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes. It is considered one of the greatest speeches ever made, maybe because of its brevity. Some of you think maybe the sermon should be 2 minutes long instead of 2 hours, right? But after his 2-minute speech, Everett came up to Lincoln and is said to have told him, "I wish that I could flatter myself that I had come as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes." How many of you have heard the speech? How many of you have heard the speech before? Let me read it to you. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggle here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Powerful, huh? So I tell you today, we are also standing on a great battlefield of war. And we also have a great task remaining before us. And God is asking, who shall I send? And who will go for us? My prayer this morning is that we will answer, here I am, send me. Thank you.